afternoon and welcome to Capital Account. I'm Lauren Lister here in Washington, D.C., and here are your headlines for Tuesday, March 6, 2012.
We will keep all options, including military action, on the table to prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
That's what Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta said about Iran to America's pro-Israel lobby AIPAC at the meeting today. Swiss money manager and gloom, boom, doom report publisher Mark Faber, meanwhile, is not waiting. He says he thinks it's inevitable sooner or later the U.S. or Israel will strike Iran, and he's offering his formula for some financial safety. We'll tell you what it is and talk about it. And Super Tuesday has voters heading to the polls in Republican primaries as the presidential election campaign season gains more and more steam. Now, the auto bailouts have driven some of the debate recently, with Romney's race in Motor City home state Michigan, and with attack ads like this one targeting Obama and GM.
They've proven that in America you can make it in any business as long as you have unlimited financial resources and the backing of the United States government.
Now, you've heard the horse race partisan analysis. Forget that. We want to look at what may really be behind criticism of the auto bailouts from people who at the same time supported bailouts for the banks. And more trouble brews as Eurostat reports that, yes, the Eurozone did shrink 0.3% as estimated in the fourth quarter from the third, and as Greece tries to get investors on board with their debt swap deal by the Thursday night deadline, investment advisor and blogger Mish will explain to us why Italy, Greece, Portugal, and Spain are going to need lots more money, and Germany and the Netherlands will end up footing the bill as this goes on. Let's get to today's Capital Account. Trouble continues in Euroland. Now, the Eurozone declined 0.3% in the fourth quarter from the third quarter, Eurostat says, and the Greek government is trying to get a bond swap deal with private creditors done by the Thursday deadline. Now, my personal favorite quote about why bondholders should accept the write-off comes from Greece's finance minister, who said in an interview, "This is the best offer because this is the only one, the only existing offer." Yeah, I guess if it's the only one, that does make it the best by default. Now, meanwhile, a detailed 73-page report is circulating that our guest and that we also, too, have been dissecting. It's called The Netherlands and the Euro, and it shows that the Netherlands would benefit by doing this to the Eurozone.
I just feel like we should chill for a while.
I think we should take a break.
You're breaking up with me?
It's not you.
Of course it's me.
It's me. I don't like you anymore.
Yeah, say goodbye to the euro is what this essentially is saying. Now, you don't hear too much about the Netherlands and the Eurozone saga, but the report explains how and why the Netherlands and Germany will end up footing the bill for Italy, Greece, Portugal, and Spain, which it says are going to need a lot more dough going forward. Now, here to talk about all of this is Mike Shedlock, investment advisor for Sitka Pacific Capital Management and author of the very popular blog Global Economic Analysis. He has been writing about this, and now we get all of his insights straight from him. So first of all, Mish, thanks for being on the show.
A pleasure to be back on the show again. You're back from Switzerland and into beautiful D.C., and the cherries aren't blooming there yet, right?
They're not blooming here yet, but they will be, and I will have you on to celebrate when they are in full bloom, Mish. Let's talk about something slightly more bleak than cherry blossoms. Let's talk about the Eurozone, because this report that I know you've been looking at, it's actually the Dutch Freedom Party that commissioned it. This is the smallest of the three parties in the government coalition. It's part of the government. Very hostile to the monetary union, wants Netherlands to leave the Eurozone. So first question is, everyone focuses on maybe someone exiting the Eurozone from the periphery. Could we all be surprised and, hey, there's a nation from the core saying, sayonara, I want to take my ball and go home?
We shouldn't be surprised by this at all. In fact, I talked about it, I think, last October. Michael Pettis at China Financial Markets actually said that the best possible scenario, and I happen to agree with them, would be for the Netherlands, for Germany to exit, leave the rest of the Eurozone to all the nanny states that want it. Certainly, if you look at the perspective from Germany and the Netherlands, they would be able to go back to a credible currency if they left right now. If instead we see Greece leaves, Portugal leaves, Spain leaves, what are their currencies going to look like? And they're going to default. They're going to default on all that debt. And what banks are holding that? Well, of course, the German banks are holding that. The French banks are holding that. The UK banks are holding that. So I think you get more bang for the buck, actually, by having Germany and the Netherlands leave than you do by doing this in piecemeal fashion. Of course, unfortunately, the way they're going about this, Lauren, is, you know, that they're heading on this piecemeal fashion, and they're trying to stop it every bit of the way. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. They've thrown 200 to 300 billion euros at trying to prevent Greece from leaving when it was a 40 billion problem 2 years ago. And now they're blaming Greece. And all these doomsday reports are out there saying, you know, all these scenarios are going to happen, you know, and they're blaming it, that it's all going to cascade on Greece.
Yeah, and we've seen that continue and continue. And I want to get more into what the bailout scenarios could continue to look like going forward. But I also want to get into some of the juicy details of this report that show how the Eurozone got into this situation, how surplus and peripheral nations got into this situation in the first place. It doesn't look like it was all so innocent to us, Mish. I want to bring up one of these charts from the report, the current account balance from 1998, which was before the euro exchange rate was locked in, to 2007. And what you can essentially see there is that this was a net positive change for Germany and the Netherlands. They've done better since joining the euro, and it was negative for a whole bunch of other countries: Belgium, France, Italy, Ireland, Spain, Greece. Even some of those countries in there had surpluses, and then they went to deficit. So you've had countries that have benefited from the euro and those that certainly have not. Mish, how did that happen, and did the euro have something to do with it?
Well, the euro had everything to do with it. It's for multiple reasons. You have an interest rate policy that's, I called it one size fits Germany, but in reality, in retrospect, I think it's one size fits none. But certainly the ECB twisted interest rate policy at every possible, way for the benefit of Germany and France, not for the benefit of Greece. So, that's one aspect of it. But the second aspect of it, it just didn't make any sense at all. We've talked about this before. Yeah, there's nothing new here. Currency unions without fiscal unions simply don't work. There's never been one in history that's worked. This one's not going to be any different. And the best solution right now is actually just to accept that fact.
Yeah. Stop trying to push for this fiscal union that doesn't seem to be happening. I want to get to that thing you said, though, about one size fits Germany with the interest rates, because we have a great chart from this report, too, showing the short-term interest rates in the different nations. I want to bring that up, because essentially what this shows was that the real rates were higher for Germans than for Greeks. So yes. Explain how this is a direct result of the monetary union creating artificially higher propensity towards savings for Germans and the Dutch, but incentivizing the borrowing and the spending in the periphery nations.
Well, this has to do a lot with fiscal policies of these nations as well. You look at the retirement age in Germany versus, say, the retirement age in Greece, the retirement age in Spain. You look at the public sector of Greece, of Spain, of Portugal. Compare that to the public sector and all the public unions. So you've got fiscal policies that did not mesh. Along comes the Eurozone, lowering the interest rate across the board, at a time when really Spain needed a higher interest rate, Greece needed a higher interest rate. So what you had is unsound borrowing in Greece, and you had unsound investment in Spain and in Ireland, where we had all these property bubbles. Portugal and Italy, meanwhile, are just, plodding along. This has not done them any good. It hasn't done them any harm. But in aggregate, it's done harm to everyone. I mean, and it's going to bust apart. The throwing more money at these problems simply cannot fix these fundamental flaws of interest rates, fundamental flaws in fiscal policies. They're trying to do it now, but they're doing it in a way that's going to force more austerity on Greece. It cannot possibly work. More austerity on Portugal cannot possibly work. And we're seeing resistance right now from Spain saying, essentially, to the EMU, screw you, we are simply not going to do what you say. We are not going to reduce our budgets to 4.4% as we agreed to. And Lauren, What is the EMU? What are they going to do? They're going to fine Spain? If these policies, if these agreements worked, they would have worked already. Right. Germany was one of the biggest violators, actually, when the Eurozone was put together, of these fiscal policies that it's now imposing on every other country. It cannot work.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I completely hear what you're saying, and they are trying to paper over it with a lot of pain that countries at this point, some aren't tanking, which for good reason, why they shouldn't. But I want to get back to what you said about the interest rates and the effect of that, because I just want to follow up and ask, in what ways was the periphery subsidizing the surplus nations? In what way were they being, the exports being subsidized of the surplus nations?
I don't know if I would look at it that way. I mean, you can make a case, you can blame Germany or you can blame Greece. And what we have here is both sides blaming each other. And in essence, they're both right. They're both guilty. They both knowingly entered this arrangement, knowing what would happen. Greece is saying, oh, we don't want to bail out, or Germany's saying we don't want to bail out Greece. And then, okay, why'd you lend them that money then?
Exactly.
They're going to default on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I want to bring up one more chart. I want to bring up one more chart that kind of gets to this and see what you think about it, because it's Dutch and German net foreign assets. It's another interesting one. And it basically attempts to show the loss that Dutch and German citizens have booked since entry into the euro as a result of their speculative investment in peripheral debt, U.S. subprime paper. Is this another example of the effects of what you don't want to call subsidies, but I guess what I'm calling subsidies?
Oh, subsidy is a good word. I mean, but you just have to look at this from 2 points of view. Yeah. It's not that Greece is entirely wrong here. And certainly Germany's right. I mean, look at the fiscal policies in Greece. Look at the public union sector and the productivity in Greece. The only way this can be fixed, and Germany is indeed right on this, is you have to attack those public unions. You have to go after them. You have to restructure these pension plans. You have to do something about these fiscal promises that cannot possibly be met. By the way, the United States is going to soon be in the same situation here. In fact, it is already. Mm-hmm. We can talk about that at another time. Yeah. But all of these imbalances, but these were known in advance by both countries. It's just not like, Germany can look back and say, oh, my God, we didn't see it coming. Well, if you didn't see it coming, then you were stupid.
Then you weren't looking very hard. Line. Yeah. So let's talk about some of those bailouts that you say are just not going to solve the problem, because I want to look at total debt, because a lot of people talk about the sovereign debt, but you have to look at private debt, too, and kind of to see the whole picture. This chart, final one, I won't bring up any charts after this, I promise. It shows corporate debt versus cash flow in all of these countries, and it shows just basically how high corporate debt is for France, Spain, and Portugal. So, Mish, who's on the line to bail out the big corporations and banks in those countries, and could those end up being on the public balance sheet, those unrealized losses?
Well, if you look at the policies that presidential candidate Hollande is proposing, one might suspect that they're going to balance this on the backs of the wealthy. If in Spain they've got different ideas, in other countries they want to do it by euro bonds and get everyone all out of debt. So you've got all of these various proposals floating around. Sarkozy's got his own ideas. The thing is, there's no agreement anywhere, Lauren, on any of these things. None of them can possibly be approved, because that's what's going to take. Germany's not going to approve euro bonds. Certainly France might go it alone and do this financial transaction tax that they're trying to do. There's various proponents in Germany that actually want to do that, but the Netherlands doesn't. Finland certainly doesn't. The UK doesn't, and caused quite a stir back in December. So after these elections, let's just see what we're at. We're heading for a disaster. I think Hollande is probably going to win the French election. I think the Merkel coalition is going to bust apart. There's this new PVV party, not new, but although they're a minority policy party in the Netherlands, they're actually a vital part of that coalition. It is the only thing holding together the Netherlands government.
A lot of political predictions there from you too, Mish, and I like that, you know, there's a huge gap between concept and reality. I want to keep talking about this because while we're on bailouts, I want to get to the U.S. as we see those bailouts become part of the conversation in Super Tuesday and the presidential kind of debate. We've got to go to break quickly, but we will be back with more with Mike Shedlock. Mish, so stick around. And still ahead, Watson. Remember Watson? He was the computer robot type thing that beat the champions of Jeopardy. Well, guess who is hiring him, or it? Wall Street. We'll tell you what we think. But first, your closing market numbers.
We just put a picture of me when I was like 9 years old on To Tell the Truth.
I have a confession. I am a total ghetto princess. I love rap and hip-hop music and Christian music.
I thought he was kind of a dick yesterday.
I'm very proud of the role that Al Jazeera has played.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete, you think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know? I'm Tom Hartman. Welcome to The Big Picture.
What drives the world?
The fear-mongering used by politicians.
Who makes decisions?
Considerable breakthrough has already been made.
Who can you trust?
No one who is imbued with a global missionary zeal.
Where are we heading?
State-controlled capitalism is called fascism.
When nobody dares to ask, we do. RT, question more.
Welcome back to Capital Account. Let's switch gears and talk about the U.S. Let's talk about the U.S. and Iran, because we've seen plenty of saber rattling from the mainstream media, of course. Here's just one example of a comment line where CNN looks like they are asserting that Iran has nukes, which is completely misleading. And Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said to AIPAC earlier today, I played a soundbite at the top of the show, that military action is the last alternative when all else fails. But he said, make no mistake, the U.S. will act if it has to when it comes to Iran. Let's talk about the financial headwinds, though. Today, we've been discussing some of them in Europe with Mike Shedlock, Mish, investment advisor for Sitka Pacific Capital Management and author of the popular blog Global Economic Analysis. But I want to ask him what one of his friends is saying about how to deal with Iran. Because, Mish, Mark Faber, Swiss money manager, and our producer Dimitri says he's a friend of yours. He reportedly says that he believes Iran and Israel will end up sooner or later at war with Iran, whether the U.S. strikes or Israel strikes. He says it's just a matter of time. So essentially, he's talking about some safety, and his formula is 25% equities, 25% gold, 25% real estate or real estate equities, 25% cash. I want to play you his reasoning and then get your thoughts on this.
There was not a dime of private capital that would have been available for a managed bankruptcy absent government help. I mean, it's very clear to me in hindsight. It wasn't so clear to me at the time, but it's very clear to me in hindsight that the auto bailout was one of the best things that have happened to this economy.
And, Mish, that was obviously not Mark Faber talking about his formula for equities or Iran. That was Warren Buffett talking about the auto bailouts. But what Mark Faber did say in this interview was that throughout history, equities have performed better than sovereign bonds. And again, I told you that formula for gold and equities, cash and real estate. What do you think about that? Do you agree or disagree?
Well, Mark certainly is a friend of mine, and if you've not read his book, Tomorrow's Gold, I strongly encourage everyone to do so. There's a link on my blog to that book. I don't get anything out of it, maybe 10 cents from Amazon or something if someone buys the book, but you really need to read that book. It's not about gold. It's actually about investing and how you approach markets and what value is. As far as formula, but I happen to agree with him as well. I think it does appear that we're heading here for war. As far as his formula, I don't necessarily know that war is going to be good for equities. I mean, it has in the past. I think other times it might not. Certainly, it might spook the financial markets. I would propose something a little bit more conservative. I don't see that. I certainly wouldn't propose real estate. I don't think it's bottom of the United States, and certainly, if you're living in Canada or Australia or China, or even the UK, there's a huge property bubbles there. Real estate, no, I would not say tie yourself down to real estate. Maybe you need to move at some point. You don't want to be tied down to real estate. But as for having 25% gold, I think that's right on the mark. My own personal belief is somewhere between 10 and 30. Okay, let's call 20 in the middle. And if you for those that want a little bit extra, 25% is certainly not a bad way to go. And as for the rest, I would just stay, wait for better times. I did a blog post on that earlier today, saying, there's a lot of merit to just recognizing that there's very little value anywhere. There's very little value in real estate. There's very little value in equities. There's very little value in junk bonds. So, what's wrong with just having a high percentage of cash? I mean, that would be my answer back from Mark. And I bet he wouldn't disagree too strongly with that point of view, actually. I don't know. I'm putting words in his mouth now.
Very interesting point. So, and before we go, since we did play that soundbite of Warren Buffett talking about the auto bailouts, he essentially ended up, believing that they were a good thing. And we've seen this really resurface in the debate during this presidential race. And it's Super Tuesday today, so a fitting thing to talk about. My question for you, though, because we hear people in the horse race dissect whether they're bad or good, and usually it's either in hammering the Republicans or hammering Obama in this presidential race. What I'm curious about is, I wonder why someone like Mitt Romney supported TARP, supported the bailout for the banks, but was opposed to the bailout of the auto industry. And what I'm wondering is if this is representative, maybe thoughts on Wall Street with people that benefit at the big banks and believe that they should be subsidized or their risks should be socialized, but then, that way they can go buy the losses of everybody else, and everybody else should go bankrupt so they can go capitalize on it.
You're reading too much into it. It's very simple. They support what's politically expedient. I mean, look at his various flip-flops on health care, crowing to President Obama, this is the way it needs to be done. Then all of a sudden the Republicans attacked Obama's plan. So Mitt Romney had to backtrack essentially on his own plan, saying, oh, well, I differed in this respect or that respect. He didn't really differ at all. The plans were in any meaningful way, actually, and it all is a little bit of exaggeration on my part. So, they do these things. Santorum's doing the same thing. You look at the only person really with a, consistent background here or consistent policy in terms of what he's saying is Ron Paul. Yeah. Why does Ron Paul not get any media attention? It's because the media is, in favor of more wars, or in favor of more bailouts, they're in favor of inflation. So the media has no vested interest in supporting someone that makes sense.
We give him attention here, Mish, and I'm glad you brought him up because we're going to talk about him later in the show. That's all we have time for right now, though. It's always so nice to talk to you. Thanks for being on. I'll have you back when the cherry blossoms are blooming so we can talk about that, too. Thanks so much. That was Mike Shedlock.
A pleasure to be on, Lauren.
All right, before we go, let's bring Dimitri Kofinas in here to talk about some of these stories that we do not want to miss talking about. And Shannon will be back tomorrow, so we'll have her insight then, too. But do you remember IBM's Watson computer? He made his name winning Jeopardy. He beat major champions. Let's look back.
Olympic oddities for 200.
Milorad Kavic almost upset this man's perfect 2008 Olympics, losing to him by 1/100th of a second. Watson.
Who is Michael Phelps?
Yes.
So he won, and that served him well because soon Watson will be advising Wall Street on risks, portfolios, and clients. Citigroup, the third largest U.S. lender, is Watson's first financial services client. Now, some of the reasons Watson is valuable: the computer can understand 200 million pages in 3 seconds. I don't know how that's even possible, but what do you think of this?
Well, I think that there's a lot here to learn because I think we've been...
What is it, Dimitri? What can we learn from this?
Well, I think, look, in all honesty now, I think that, you remember the Terminator movies? They came during the military buildup of the Reagan administration. There was a lot of concern about computers and what they would do as far as war and technology is concerned. And so a lot of the focus has been on that. But I think what the real concern should be, the whole Skynet concern should be these machines becoming too big to fail. And then basically waging war on the United States through the financial markets. You could start seeing these guys lob derivative bombs, do hostile takeovers of companies.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is, you know, this is a real danger in my opinion.
It's a real threat, yeah.
It's a much bigger threat than the military-industrial complex, the banking-industrial complex, and these machines. You're merging machine with banker, and nothing could be more dangerous.
Okay, no, you know, I think I might disagree with you because at first that was my thought, not exactly with the Skynet stuff, but I was thinking, you know, this is concerning. This is kind of like the high-frequency trading now going into assessing risk and regulations and all of that. But then I got to thinking, this computer has all of these things that are valuable that maybe, you know, an analyst would have, looking at documents and reading them and analyzing them and modeling and all those sorts of things.
I know where you're going with this.
Guess what it doesn't have that is a very human instinct that we have seen wreak havoc in Wall Street, and that is greed.
I like that. I didn't know where you're going with that. I like that. So basically, we're better off with the machine. Because the machine is cold calculating. It doesn't have the lust for power. Interesting. I like that.
I win. I like it. Let's move on. Okay. The Harvard Business Review found that people who are prone to guilt tend to work harder and perform better than people who are not guilt prone. I guess a little like this.
I ordered the death of my brother. He injured me. I killed my mother's son.
So, obviously, guilty people go to confessional, but also, according to this research, they do quite well in the workplace based on this standard psychological test that was administered. It measured the tendency to feel guilt, and it found that people that were guilty did a lot better, were viewed as better leaders, harder workers. I buy it.
Yeah, you know what I think? I think that it's one of those extremes. It's a bipolar distribution. So the people that are really guilty do well, but the people that do the best are the sociopaths. Because those guys don't give a crap at all. They don't care. So they don't care if they do anything really bad, and that allows them to climb the corporate ladder, which is why I think in banking you've got a group of soldiers at the bottom who are guilty, and then you've got the sociopaths at the top. You
know, I actually kind of agree with you on that bimodal distribution because I'm a really guilty person and a really hard worker. I'm not a sociopath, but I've seen them do well. That's it. That's all we have time for. I'll leave you with that. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Lauren Lister. Give us feedback at youtube.com/capitalaccount. And from everyone here on the show, thanks so much for watching. Have a good night.